Once again, good evening. We're so glad that you've joined us for this community meeting. This is a meeting that is being conducted by the California Department of Toxic Substances Control. And the focus of the meeting is to provide some information about the Technical Assistance Grant Program. And importantly, hear input and your guidance on different aspects of this program, which DTSC is going to use as they continue to develop the program and launch it. So I'm Joan Isaacson, I'm the facilitator for the meeting, but before I tell you more and give you the roadmap of what to expect, let me introduce to you Ed Moreland, who is a DTSC branch chief.
Well, good evening, everybody, again, and welcome. We're very happy to have you on board this evening as part of this polling session. So this evening, our goal is to introduce you to the Technical Assistance Grants Program, and you'll hear us calling it the TAG program. And we'll be talking to you about the essentials of the program, kind of the very rough structure as it now exists, and just giving you a series of PowerPoint slides, a small series about each aspect of that program. After we give you the rundown on each kind of essential core part of the program, we're going to be also having a polling session regarding that aspect of the program. So after each of us finishes, our Kearns and West colleagues will be holding that polling session on our behalf. So just to emphasize for tonight, though, we are really interested in gaining your input this evening regarding the TAG program, because we are still in the really early stages of the TAG program development of the framework itself. We wanted to get it out there to the community and to the stakeholders as soon as we reasonably could, and to be able to gain your input and make those adjustments accordingly. So to really emphasize more than anything else during this meeting, you'll hear me speaking that this is by no means cast in stone. So please give us your input tonight through the polling responses. And at this point in time, I'm going to turn things back to Joan.
Excellent. All right. Thanks, Ed. If you just go back to the prior slide, please. All right. So just want to I'm going to give you some information about the meeting, a little bit more about the purpose and the objectives and the agenda. So you have that roadmap of how we're going to navigate. So Kearns and West is facilitating the meeting, and we are a firm that focuses on public involvement, and we're really here to make sure that we're really optimizing the meeting to hear from as many people as possible. And you heard Ed talk about this as a polling session. And so there, just like Ed said, you're going to hear different modules, and then we have poll questions, and I'm going to help get everyone connected to the polling system. You know, we're always trying to do different things with the virtual meetings since we're not able to be in person. And so we wanted to try to really, optimize what we can do with polls, because it's one way that we make sure that we hear from everyone on all of the questions that we have for community members this evening. So you'll be hearing mini presentations from DTSC team members who are involved in the technical assistance grant, and then we'll have poll questions after each of those modules. I want to let you know that the session is being recorded, and then the recording will be posted on the DTSC website, so that way people can't be here this evening, they'll still have an opportunity to check it out and gain the information. And there's also going to be a survey posted that takes all of the poll questions we're using this evening, and we're putting those into an online survey, and that will be on DTSC's website as well. So we will give you more information about where to find that later on in this evening's meeting. All right, let's go to the next slide. We'll talk a little bit more about the specific objectives for the meeting. So let me just let you know first, for those who are interested, I just want to let you know that we have turned on the closed captioning function for the Zoom platform. And the place to find it, and you can see it circled in red on your screen, but it's in the lower right part of your screen on the toolbar, but just look for the lower right. And we have, because we are relying on the polling system for gaining input, we're going to use the chat box in this meeting just for people to communicate with our technical team in case you're having some glitch with the online polling system or any other technical questions. And again, this session is being recorded. So the objectives for the meeting are to continue DTSC's important priority of engaging vulnerable communities that are facing environmental challenges. This is a priority for the California Department of Toxic Substances Control, but also just a priority for the state of California overall. Another important objective is to share information with community members and stakeholders about the Technical Assistance Grant Program. And I want to let you know that it really is in the initial stages of development. And so the input that you all are providing here this evening is going to be used by the TAG team to continue to develop that program and get it ready for launch. So we want to hear your input about the TAG program. And then we also have polling questions to hear your perspectives and input on future engagement opportunities. This slide has a more specific outline of our agenda for this evening's meeting. We're going to start out with everyone getting connected to the polling system, and we have some warm-up questions to make sure that everyone's up and running. And then we're going to just methodically work through 4 topics related to the Technical Assistance Grant Program. So we're going to hear about just an overview of what the program is in relationship to the Cleanup and Vulnerable Communities Initiative. The TAG program is one of the CVCI, or the Cleanup and Vulnerable Communities Initiative programs. It nests under that. And then we have modules focusing on specific components of the TAG program. So the technical advisors component of TAG, the community science component, and then the community engagement component. So again, we're going to hear some information from the project team on each of these topics, and then we'll have poll questions. And we'll be able to share the results in real time with you on the poll questions. So we'll all get to see how everyone else is responding to the poll questions. Some of the poll questions are open-ended, and that was really important to DTSC so that you all have a chance to share your thoughts. And so especially there's a question at the end that where you'll be able to share other input that you have that didn't get captured in any of the other questions. So I think we'll go ahead and get started. So what we want to do first is focus on getting everyone connected to the polling system. And so on the slide now, you can see 3 different ways to get connected to the polling system. And so you can use the browser on your computer. You can use the browser on a smartphone, but you can also use text messaging on just a regular cell phone or a smartphone. And if you're going to use the browser, you just enter, and you see it there in green, pollev.com/KWPoll1. So again, on your browser, on your laptop or your computer, or you can enter that into your smartphone. And I believe our tech team just put in the link to the browser. So you should just be able to click on that. Or you can use text message. And to use text message, and that's actually my usual way I participate in these types of polls, is that you put in the message in the message box, KWPoll1, and then you send it to 22333. And again, I just want to let all of you know that the polling questions that we're using are going to be, they're going to be taken into an online questionnaire or survey that will be posted after the meeting. And so you can provide additional input using the online survey. And by all means, if you can forward it to other people so that your friends, colleagues, and neighbors have a chance to participate and provide input too, that'd be awesome. And again, use the chat box to communicate with our tech team if you're having an issue connecting up. I know sometimes the polls aren't perfect, like the connections aren't perfect. So I just want, again, like know that you will be able to participate and find that online survey. And if you're having any issue with the polls during this session. So we have 2 warm-up questions just to get us all going. And we'll go to the first one. And that is, oh, some of you have already found it. That's awesome. And the first question is, are you attending this poll session as a member of a vulnerable community, as a potential technical advisor, or someone who works with the vulnerable community, or other? If you're texting in answers, you just have to text in the letter that corresponds to the answer. So let's say I'm someone who works with vulnerable communities, I would text in the letter C for my response if I was texting in. Okay, so it looks like we have a good distribution across the 3 categories: community members, potential technical advisors, as well as people who work in vulnerable communities. And you can see we have an even split 3 ways right now, which is great. We always like to have make a lot of different perspectives. Okay, let's go to our next question. And this question is, if there is a DTSC cleanup site near you, how close is it to you? Is it less than a quarter mile, quarter to 1 mile, or more than 1 mile away? So this is just another question for us to get to know a little bit more about who our participants are this evening. So many of you who've answered so far are pretty close. You're within a quarter or a mile. So we're really glad you're here. We know that those of you who live near sites, you have a lot of questions and always have really good input for DTSC. Okay, thanks for getting connected to the site. I just want to let you know, during this meeting, if you see me looking down at my phone, it's because this is the way, it's for virtual, this is the way I can communicate with my tech team. And so I just want to let you know that. So I don't want you to think I'm just being distracted. It's just because I'm staying in touch with the tech team, which they're in separate locations from me right now. All right, let's get moving. And we're going to go now to our first module. And Ed's going to come back and provide some information to us about DTSC's Cleanup in Vulnerable Communities Initiative, and then how the Technical Assistance Grant Program fits within that initiative. So Ed, on to you.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Joan. If we can have the next slide, please. I'm going to start off this evening just talking about the background on Technical Assistance Grants Program. The TAG program is a subset of the Cleanup in Vulnerable Communities Initiative. And we'll be throwing those letters around occasionally, CVCI, for those of you who are familiar with it. CVCI is a program that's rooted in Senate Bill 158, which was signed by the governor's office in July of last year, July of 2021. There are 5 components of CVCI, 5 major components. And the purpose of each of the components is to reduce environmental burdens in vulnerable communities. You can see, as on the screen here, there are 2 major portions of that pie: discovery and enforcement, and equitable community revitalization grants. Those monies are intended to investigate sites that have not been previously investigated, with a focus primarily on sites where dry cleaners are, because they are embedded very much in communities. And the other is to deal with brownfields and to encourage and cleanups of brownfield sites that are currently not being utilized. So those are the 2 major components with regard to finances. But there are other smaller portions of this pie that are small, but are very important, including community benefits agreements portion of the pie, workforce development program for community members in these vulnerable communities. And last but not least are the technical assistance grants. Overall, CVCI has $500 million associated with it for the cleanup and beneficial use of these burdened properties and burdened communities. For us, for the TAG program, we have a portion of that of $3.5 million. If we could go on to the next slide, please. So from this point on, we'll be focusing on our portion of the CVCI program, and that is the technical assistance grants, otherwise known as TAG. The TAG program is indeed a grants program that will be awarded to vulnerable communities to provide resources to better understand, to be able to provide feedback for communities, to provide feedback regarding cleanup actions, and for those communities to become more highly engaged in the cleanup processes that DTSC is engaged in and that which we oversee. And so with regard to that, the TAG program has two major elements we'll be talking about this evening. The first is to provide technical advisors to vulnerable communities. And those technical advisors will assist the communities in terms of the understanding of the science behind the cleanup actions and the regulatory information that is embedded within those cleanup actions, and these which are also known as response actions. And you see, we bolded that on the screen today, and I'll talk a bit further about it a few slides beyond this one, but that's a key term for you to identify here. The other key element is community science. And community science is this opportunity to really engage the communities in a hands-on way to be able to become involved in the science that the cleanups actually engage. All right, next slide, please. So I'm going to talk a bit about eligibility for the TAG grants, technical assistance grants, or TAGs. I'll be talking first about project area requirements, and I'll be following that about community requirements. So project area requirements are just that. What is associated with that community that makes it qualify for these TAG grants? First of all, the key is that they should be defined as a vulnerable community, and that is with Cal EnviroScreen scores of 3.0 score or CES greater than 75%. Also, a key component is that these sites need to be within our DTSC's mitigation and restoration program oversight. That means we have to be actively engaged with these sites and somewhere in the process of cleaning them up. And that's what the last bullet comes down to in terms of, again, the response actions, that site needs to be in the response action process as a DTSC cleanup. Next slide, please. So let's focus on that word now, on the response action word. Really, a response action is any part of the cleanup process from beginning to end, which the DTSC oversees. And here's a list of items kind of from beginning of the process to the end of the process, if you will, of aspects of the work that we do. First bullet, investigations. That means a site, it could be in the process of being investigated for soils contamination, could be groundwater contamination, and ultimately maybe soil gas contamination, which is a really active component of environmental risk these days. So that's the beginning of the process. Then there's the evaluation of once you have a better understanding of what's there in the ground, is to select a remedy to do that cleanup. And the plans are developed in order to support those cleanups, and they could be called a removal action work plan or a remedial action plan. You've probably heard of those two. Remedial action plans are called RAPs. Biggest portion is the actual cleanup itself, and that has a wide variety of actions that could take place. It could involve a simple dig up and removal of the contaminated soil, or range to much more complicated parts of the process involving soil vapor extraction or groundwater pump and treat cleanup or some other chemical treatment of the soil that's very complicated. Kind of the last part of the process really is once the major part of the cleanup has been kind of solidified, if you will, and completed, then if there is an ongoing operation and maintenance aspect to that cleanup. For instance, if groundwater is contaminated, do those groundwater pumping systems need to be continually pumping for many years potentially to be able to effectively clean up that groundwater? And they would need to continue to pump until the groundwater is adequately cleaned up. So that's kind of the spectrum of what we would say falls within our response action realm. So the tag agreements, as we see it, could be open to vulnerable communities. That could be in any stage of those response actions. Next slide, please. So now let's switch to the other aspect I mentioned, and that's the applicant requirements, the community requirements. We mentioned here two types of applicants. This is still very much in kind of the formative stages of our planning. What's very clear from Senate Bill 158 is that these grants are to be awarded to vulnerable communities, as I mentioned. And it's those communities that would be seeking technical advisors to support them. And they would be the ones to actually select the technical advisors. That is a process of selection that we want to get our arms around it, get your input on. So that'll be an important part of our future workings. We're looking at other options also where potentially technical advisors may see the need for a community tag program. And they might be, in effect, the organizer in applying for a tag. But in any of the case, the applicant, which will be a community, a vulnerable community, will need to meet the requirements that we've got shown here under the second bullet on the screen. First of all, that those community groups, those vulnerable communities, cannot be part of the response action itself. And that just simply means that there's not a connection between the community applicants and the responsible party actually doing the cleanups. The second requirement is that the group that is applying for these tag grants, that they have the support of their community, that the applicants actually represent the community at large, and they have their backing. And the third aspect is whoever is selected as the technical advisor will need to meet technical requirements, that is with regard to their educational background, as well as to their experience in dealing with environmental cleanups as the ones that we practice. Next slide, please. So let's go through just in terms of the application process as we see it now. The interested parties, as we just explained, they will be a community group or some combination of the community group and the technical advisor themselves. Or that the application could also be oriented in the direction of community science, a community science program for the community, which I'm going to talk about here a little later down the line. So they'll need to be able to demonstrate that support from the community. Some key elements, though, that we want to introduce to all our stakeholders is that we're going to be sharing the evaluation criteria in advance for the application process. We want the communities to understand the application process and how those applications are going to be evaluated. So once those are screened, then DTSC will award those funds accordingly. And the last bullet means that we haven't got this process entirely filled out yet. We're still in that process of putting kind of the program for applications together. Next slide, please. So funds, in terms of the awards of the grant funds, the applicants for those grants will be responsible for managing the grant funds themselves. That includes managing their own organization of the grant, the accounting of the funds as they're being spent, the tracking of those funds to make sure that they're being adequately spent on appropriate tasks. So those requirements also have yet to be developed. Next slide, please. So in terms of general timeline for the TAG program, what we're doing tonight is really holding a key milestone for the TAG program. We've been trying to get the general components of TAG together for several months, trying to get that framework out there to you, and that's what we're doing tonight. We want to get that general framework out there tonight and get your input early on so we can make modifications as necessary to be able to move the TAG program forward. Okay, so that once again, we're still in the very early sessions. Once we have consolidated the polling session information, we'll evaluate that information and start moving the program forward. And we will have multiple touch points along the way as we move closer and closer toward putting sites out there for the application process. And we'll be, if the polling sessions are a workable venue for that, we'll do that. We could have webinars or roundtables to be able to plan for future engagement. And you're going to see some of the polling questions you'll see in a few moments here asking you what your preference would be with regard to that community engagement. Once we've done that further refinement of the process of the TAG program and its structure, we will further solidify it, and we're going to go through a pre-qualification trial phase for TAG just to kind of test it out to make sure it runs properly, and then do any last kind of tweaking of the process to make sure it meets the community's needs in a timely way. So with that, I'm going to pass the discussion back to Joan for our next polling session.
All right, it's time to get to work, everyone. So on the screen right now is a reminder about how to connect to the polling system. You can use your browser on your smartphone or your computer or text in answers. And again, the browser, what you put in your browser is shown there in the green, pollev.com/KW poll1. And that address is going to be on all of the question slides. So we'll keep giving that to you. Let's go to our first question. And this is a open-ended question. So with this question, you type your answer into the box that's showing on your screen right now or on your smartphone, or you can type this into the message box when you're texting and then just hit send. So that's the other way to participate. And we find that it works best when people submit shorter sentences, and you can enter as many sentences as you want to. But we find that the shorter answers tend to work better. And as soon as people, as the answers start coming in, we'll start seeing those scroll down the screen. So again, how would you define a vulnerable community? You heard Ed talk about using Cal and VirusScreen, scores 75% or higher as a way to define a vulnerable community. But if you think there are other ways that DTSC should be looking at defining vulnerable communities for the purpose of the TAG program, then let us know. This is kind of input that DTSC wants to hear right now. So we have an answer that's come in. Any community that is affected in any way by a cleanup site? Thanks for that answer. A community that's downstream or in proximity to a contaminated site. An economically lower medium income community that has increased ethnic racial diversity located close to a toxic environmental hazard. Lower socioeconomic communities, typically having a large number of industrial facilities. This is all great input, so just keep those answers coming in. We'll stay about another minute on this so that for those of you who are writing your answers, just make sure in the next minute to hit send so that the answers get entered in. So we see someone confirming 75% or higher on Cal and virus screen, as well as proximity to a toxic site. Any community where cleanup has not taken place for 50 years. Fence line communities located near major industry with emissions and or toxic dump sites. So as I'm reporting back on the poll questions, know that I may not read off all of the answers, but know that everything is being recorded and documented, and all of your input will be reported to DTSC. Let's go to our next question. I think we have 6 for this first module. Okay, so here's another question for you. If you have a specific DTSC cleanup site in mind that you think could benefit from a technical assistance grant, can you share a few words about that cleanup site? The location, maybe the project type, maybe the community needs. This just helps the DTSC to understand what are the kinds of sites that people might be thinking about in terms of a application for the technical assistance grant. So one site is described as a statistically a higher number of emergency medical calls by the fire department as a way to describe that site. There's an answer here about cleanup that was supposed to be completed in 2017 but never started, and relying on agreements that are not being followed, and that's SFFL, the Santa Susana Field Lab site. We'll pause and see if we have any other entries coming in on this one. All right, a neighborhood surrounding dry cleaners where PCE soil gas has spread under homes. Selby Slag in Selby, California, adjacent to 2 unincorporated lower income communities in the watershed, and will be subjected to sea level rise. Someone's talking, another mentioned about Santa Susana, someone living downstream. Couple of comments about identification of Selby Slag in Rodeo, California, where there are heavy metal toxins in the Bay Area that are primarily due to intruding water from the upper watershed. And we'll wait just another 30 seconds or so. So if you're working on an answer, go ahead and finish it and enter it. Okay, there's another site being identified as the Brisbane Baylands. Contains an old rail yard, a landfill, and an industrial site located by San Francisco Bay. A site where housing development has been held up because of the presence of TCE in the groundwater, and West Oakland site in a food desert area. So we can see that there are a lot of different kinds of sites in different places with different community needs that you all are thinking about. I think we can go ahead and go to our next question. Thank you all for participating in the polling. We just really appreciate it. All right, so keep thinking about the site that you answered about in the last question. So for the same Dtsc cleanup site, tell us now about what are those key concerns for the community? What are some of those key issues of concern for the community about those DTSC cleanup sites that you all identified in the prior question? What are the questions that communities have, the concerns, their ideas maybe that they have for those sites? And as you know from the prior questions, it just takes like a moment for the answers to start scrolling in on the screen. Issue of concern for one site is the failure of DTSC and the responsible parties to delineate the contamination plume. We have another answer here about the divided community, low trust, lacking education of the community and political interference. Concerns about the adoption of unprotected exposure standards. Acid pit leached with heavy metals that have leached with the groundwater flow, spreading a toxicity to San Francisco Bay. Biggest concern is politics over the science, where the process has been hijacked by outside special interests. Cleanup should not make the problem worse. An EIR that has a negative declaration, yet the current plan includes the dredging the edge of the toxic site at Selby Slag. Cleaning up piecemeal, which makes new communities vulnerable to neighbors' toxins. And we'll stay about another minute on this question and we'll go to the next one. So if you're typing in an answer, just go ahead and finish typing and go ahead and enter. So the concern is for the impact on the land, the water, and the air. We're concerned for people who might live and work and visit this land. Concerns about heavy metals, mine tailings, hazardous waste, construction debris. Reliance exclusively on interrupting pathways as opposed to actual remediation of the contamination. Outside interference receives more feedback from DTSC than the community. And sea level rise mobilization of toxicity. All right, thanks everyone for those answers and sharing your knowledge about your sites. Really appreciate it. We have a couple more questions and then we're gonna go to our next module and learn more about the TAG program. So let's go to the next question. What resources would you need to be able to manage a technical assistance grant? So would you, in your community, be looking for help maybe starting a nonprofit or maybe some assistance and support on managing the grant funds or getting resources for the startup of the project that you have in mind and that you want to use that technical assistance grant for? So what resources would you be looking for to help you and your community or your organization manage one of these grants? So we have a comment here about Selby Slag. DTSC's plan is both inadequate and unsafe. The community has a better plan to stop the acid and the heavy metal leaching into the bay. So another answer about kinds of resources that would be helpful is getting the resources. This response is we already have the nonprofit. DTSC criteria needs to be specific. And another answer to this question is some assistance to further the scientific exploration of the alternative community plan. Independent review of plans in the EIRs, and startup resources and mandated access to the site and its investigative history for inspection. Another response here was, in some cases, a community group may need to use a fraction of the funds to administer the grants, convene the public meetings, and oversee the technical advisors. We need independent resources. Resources equal money. We need to set up an education program geared towards restoring the environment after the cleanup. So I'm going to give you about another half minute to finish up answers for this question, and we'll go to the next one. We would need help forming a nonprofit and managing the funds, hiring the technical staff, and the ongoing administrative funds. All right, next question. Multiple choice. This one will go quicker for everyone. So this question is, which of the following should DTSC consider as applicants for this grant? And we're asking that, that you can select all the categories that you think apply. So we're asking you to look at this list and then select all of the different categories that you think should be able to apply and be considered for a technical assistance grant. And you all are populating with the answers, and so we can just pause a minute and watch the answers come in. And Mina, who's helping us with tech support, just sent out a reminder that if you're texting in answers, you can still text in multiple answers. Just type in your one letter, hit send, the next letter, hit send. It still works that way. So it seems like what we're hearing is that in general, we have people who think that all of these different categories of different stakeholders and communities should be considered as applicants for the grant, especially nonprofit groups and community groups, maybe who, even if they're not a formal nonprofit, and then local and tribal governments as well. Got a lot of hits on this question. Okay, let's go to the next question. And what do you think should be the top priority for the technical assistance grant program? So if you were one of the DTSC team members who is formulating and developing the technical assistant grant program rollout, what would you want to make the top priority? All right, the answers are coming in on the screen. You can see them scrolling down. Partnership with the community, engaging community members are two answers that have come in already. We'll probably see some more in just a couple moments. Engage the community. Empower the concerns of the community with real facts and resources, allowing independent professional advice from qualified consultants that will be listened to by DTSC, considering all alternative plans, including the community-based plans. Focus on those communities where DTSC is about to make important decisions about remediation. Community support and outreach, finding a technical expert simultaneously with community empowerment, safe remediation with community input, the capability of the applicant to manage the work and the funds. So give you, we'll take about another half minute or so you can all finish up your answers. Okay, I think we might have one question left on this module. We'll go to the next slide. Actually, that was it. Okay, thanks everyone. Really, really important input, and I can, just by seeing the answers, it's very clear that all of you who are participating here in this meeting this evening have a lot of experience and really understand what some of those key issues are with community members. So keep keep participating as we get to those next poll questions. We're going to hear now more about the technical advisor component of the TAG program. And Isabella Roman is going to share the information with us. Welcome, Isabella. Isabella is one of the environmental scientists at DTSC.
Thanks, Joan. So yeah, as Joan said, my name is Isabella Roman. I'm an environmental scientist. I'm a member of the DTSC TAG team, helping put together this program. So I'm going to be talking about the technical advisor component of the program, everything that we know about it so far. Next slide, please. So one thing that's really essential about the program is that these advisors need to be chosen and or approved by the community. That community support and backing is something that's really important to the program. And again, the purpose of the advisors is this is someone who would assist the community in understanding and becoming more involved with response actions near them, specifically Dtsc Cleanup Sites. And the way we see it now is there would be two, depending on which program you apply for. If you apply for the general program or the community science program, there are the two different types of advisors. There's the general advisors and then the community science advisors, each of which have different education and experience requirements and different duties that they would perform. And we'll talk more about community science later on today. Next slide, please. So this slide shows some examples of technical advisor duties. And again, everything that the advisor is doing is with the goal in mind of helping the community by educating them and helping them become more involved in response actions at these Dtsc cleanup sites. So that could theoretically be a lot of different things during the whole process. It could be something more regulatory in nature, like what is Dtsc's cleanup process, or it could be something more technical and scientific, like what is a risk assessment, or what do these numbers mean, and what are these chemicals. So this slide shows some examples. The technical advisor would be able to assist with understanding of DTSC's cleanup process, create fact sheets, observe field work, attend public meetings, interpret and convey site documents, assist with comment preparation, and teach scientific principles. All again relating back to the response action at the DTSC cleanup site, and all with the goal of helping the community by educating and helping them become more involved. So that's it. I'm going to hand it back over to Joan for more questions, I think.
Yep. We're going to go back to polling. And the next set of questions, there are about 6 again, a mix of open-ended and multiple choice. And these questions are now focused around the technical advisor component of the TAG program. So we'll go to our first question. All right, this first question here for this module is, what experience and qualifications are most important for a technical advisor to have? So DTSC is, as they're thinking through the application process, they need to develop the criteria for the qualifications of a technical advisor. And they want to hear from all of you about what you think are the most important experience and types of experience and qualifications that the technical advisor should have. So you can type in your answers, and they'll start scrolling down the screen in just a moment. There's always a little bit of a lag time. And here we go. So our first answer is familiarity with the site and familiarization with the issues and the science involved in its cleanup. So an answer like site-specific knowledge for the technical advisor. Experience as a member or an advocate for community groups, familiarity with the response action process. Degrees in environmental area like geology, chemistry, hydrology, and experience in these areas. PhD and experiences in toxics remediation. Another answer about good understanding of the project site and understanding of the community where the project site exists, as well as scientific background. They need to be unbiased, unrelated to the community, and high level. We are a savvy community, a knowledgeable community, a background in health and safety in the related field, and a history of helping communities and or helping them with public health. Knowledge of the bay mud formations and sea level rise, understanding of hydrology over time, especially related to droughts and other 100-year events. Project management skills, toxicology and engineering expertise. We have answers about combinations of degrees, experience commensurate with the expertise of the regulatory staff. This is all fantastic input. Thank you. Specific expertise related to the issues as at the site, as opposed to degrees or certification. So looking more at the site and the specific issues, and then matching the expertise to the site-specific issues. We need help with the regulatory process. Experience with the community who is and has a community experience relating to the cleanup of contaminated sites. The ability to explain technical issues into plain language. A willingness to review our alternative remediation plan and to compare it to the efficacy of the DTSC plan. Needs an engineering background as well as background in toxic chemistry. So why don't you all take another couple moments or so to finish your answers on this one, and then we'll go to the next question. All right, I think we can move on. Okay, so this next question, as you can see on the screen, is multiple choice. And we're asking you about what is the most helpful service a technical advisor could offer to your community. You can select multiple answers. And again, if you're texting in answers, you can still text in multiple letters to correspond to your answer choices. So what we're seeing on the screen right now, with the way the answers are distributed across the options, is that for those of you who have joined the meeting this evening, you're looking for different kinds of services. So whether it's we see interest in oversight of work on Dtsc Cleanup Sites, representing and assisting the community during the cleanup process. And equal to those first two are explaining the regulatory process. So we'll keep this answer up for another moment while, if anyone has any other answers they want to select. And you can see at the G at the bottom is other, and I should have pointed that out earlier. We're going to give you a chance to give us details if you've identified other in the next question. Okay, let's go to the next question. So this is an open-ended question. So we gave you some ideas in the last question about how a technical advisor might be helpful to your community. But now this is an open-ended question where you can let us know all your other ideas for how a technical advisor might be helpful and the kinds of services that you would be seeking for your specific site and your specific community. And also, if you did answer other in that prior question, this is the place where you can tell us what your other is. So one idea for a technical advisor, one needs that one of our participants this evening has identified is a technical advisor who can act as a mediator. Also, other areas that you are identifying right now include gathering all the project information in one understandable source, educating the community, participating in multiple types of community meetings and events to reach all groups, regardless of their activity in the community. A mediator, initial testing of toxicity on ongoing mentoring, presentations and knowledge of solutions. While you all are finishing putting your answers in, Mina, I have someone who just sent me a chat that they are having issue. So I'm going to ask if you can follow up with them out. I'm going to chat you their name. Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, actually, looks like he might have made it in. Okay, looks like our slides slipped there for a minute. Okay, I think we can, so we had some more answers that came in while I was just making a connection there for tech assistance. Initial testing and monitoring, facilitating a community message board. These are all such great ideas that a tech advisor can help out with. Providing ongoing oversight to assure the community understands the risks and issues related to particular contaminants. Acting as a liaison between the community, DTSC, polluters, and developers. The Fort Ord Environmental Justice Network Tech Advisor helps to summarize documents and attend and present at meetings. So that thanks for the ideas, and also thanks for the reference on an existing tech advisor and what they're doing. That's really helpful for the team too. Okay, let's go to the next question. Do you know a person, organization, or institution that could serve as a technical advisor? If so, please provide a name and a brief description. And it's like there could be an institution like a think tank, or it could be institutions, such a broad terms. Like think about like maybe local government agencies or a university as examples of institutions. Okay, we've got some answers coming in. Let's see, another idea or example of institution is a resource conservation district. Need a committee to bridge the gap. Geologists or other scientists from local area who knows the site and issues. There's a name for a student of environmental scientists or environmental science, geologists and hydrologists. One of our participants here this evening provides technical assistance at vapor intrusion sites. University of California or the Lawrence Livermore National Lab. We have someone who wrote in may have a different opinion about who would be a qualified technical advisor. We have Jay Gunkelman and Designated Associates as ideas, and then also the Fort Ord Environmental Justice Services as a possible technical advisor. Another environmental scientist, G. Fred Lee, are creating a hazard abatement district. Or maybe this is an environmental scientist who created a hazard abatement district. Why don't we take another moment and we'll, you all can finish up your answers to this question before we move on. So this is helpful. Just again, you know, like you might be wondering, well, why is DTSC asking for specific examples? But this will allow DTSC then to do some research and look at the qualifications and experience of who you're naming, whether institutions or individuals. And that will, again, just give them more things to consider as they're developing the applications for the grants. Okay, let's go to our next question. All right, so here's this question. Would you be comfortable selecting a technical advisor from a list of DTSC pre-screened advisors? So one, as you can tell from the question, one of the things that the DTSC team is thinking about is, would it be helpful if they did some pre-screening that kind of would then kind of narrow the field a little bit, so to say, for communities to then do further exploration of technical advisors. All right, lots of different input coming in. So some yeses, yes, but only if we could interview the technical advisors in private, or we can add other names. It depends on who and how the advisors are being pre-screened. Yes, if alternatives are being realistically considered. Someone says, absolutely, I would prefer that. We have one more question for you about the technical advisor component, but I'll hold off because it looks like people are still writing in some answers. Someone says, I would not be comfortable using a pre-screened list from DTSC unless they had detailed information about the educational and professional background of the advisor. Okay, one more question about technical advisors. You all are champs with this polling, and we really appreciate it. It's fantastic. Again, I just appreciate all this input so much. Okay, this is another open-ended question. Technical advisors would need to be supported by the community. What indicators should DTSC be looking for to gauge whether there is community support for technical advisors? So if a technical advisor was being considered for your community, what would you want DTSC to be checking to make sure that your community does have the support and does support that specific technical advisor? So we've got some answers coming in. One says, like, just let the community pick the designated technical advisor and then DTSC could approve them. Letters of support for community groups and local agencies, support letters from local organizations which represent the community, Another suggestion, DTSC, is do your research on it. Another measure or metric that could be used that's being offered is looking for a long history of community engagement. Signatures, attendance to an event or a positive response, letters of support. Again, history of helping communities of concern. Support from an existing organization, a referral from a local government agency. A community message board could be used for community conversations to identify support for an advisor. This is probably an answer to the last question, but we'll make sure it gets put in the right category. But someone suggested a local group called the Brisbane Baylands Community Advisory Group, who has the trust of the community, but they need more technical expertise. Folks, we're going to move on to the next component of our session for this evening. And we're going to next hear more about the community science component of the technical assistance grant program. And then we have a series of similar types of polling questions about community science to hear your input on how DTSC can proceed. Ed, we're back to you on this.
Very good. Thanks, Joan. You know, before I start, I just have to say how impressed I am with all your answers and your participation. I'm going to have to thank you multiple times during this effort on this participation because it is so important. But for now, let's go ahead and switch in terms of the TAG program toward the direction of community science. So it's a major element of the TAG program, but what do we mean by this? What do we mean by community science? You know, when we first started putting this together, we have really grappled with what community science is. So community science falls into three major branches, if you will. You treat community science like the trunk of a tree, and there are three major branches as we see it. One is to use science as a tool to engage communities in environmental issues. That's kind of the overall meaning of community science. But communities has overall kind of the intent, a major intent of doing science education for communities. That's one of those major branches. And we're going to talk about an example of that DTSC has already engaged in as a department. But it's really meant it's not necessarily as a direction towards solving a problem with a response action, but really to educate the community and to get the community excited about environmental science, and especially the students within that community that could take part and form their futures to be future environmental scientists and engineers. So that's one major branch. The second branch really is toward the collection of environmental data around cleanup sites, around the cleanup sites. And I like to see this and call it really in the area of crowdsourcing. Crowdsourcing, I think most of us are familiar with data collection, right? Collect large amounts of data, fairly simple data to understand and to enter into a system of sorts, bring it all together and see what those results are. So that's the second aspect. And we'll talk a little bit about some examples of that potentially. And the third is really kind of collecting technical and legally defensible data. And that would be guided by and collected by environmental science professionals. Clearly, legally defensible data is something that is very high on the list for DTSC response actions, and that's something we oversee and that makes sure that happens, that the data collected by consultants or the responsible parties are truly valid and trustworthy. So to be able to collect that sort of data, it involves obviously a special skill set, special training, years of experience. And really of ultimate importance is protection of whoever is doing that sampling and protection of their health. You know, our sites are indeed considered toxic sites. And the last thing we want to do is expose any members of the community that are doing community science to those types of toxic hazards. So those are the three areas, major areas of community science. So let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. And here are some of the examples that we've thrown out there. Training community members, and that's training from a generic standpoint in environmental science and the kind of science, different groups of science aspects that come together to really make environmental science a discipline, if you will. And then we talked about the health and safety monitoring. And when I talked about crowdsourcing of data a few minutes ago, this is where I'm really heading in terms of air monitoring, or say dust monitoring. Say you have a neighborhood that's right adjacent to a site and the site is moving lots of soil around. Clearly, one important aspect of protection of the public in that regard is to prevent dust that potentially has toxics associated with it from leaving that site. So that's a huge area of importance. And members of the surrounding community could somehow say, send us data by some mechanism to us to be able to document that dust is a problem at that site. So we can go back to those responsible parties to make that not happen. And we're looking at ways to do that. It may be some sort of photographic evidence that they can send us. And data collection, that's another generic term. It could be that any type of crowdsourced data. It could be odors leaving the site. It could be the dust again. Or it actually could be collection of validated data. And I'll talk, and this is, again, data that would be collected by an environmental professional that could be used soundly in the decision-making of the cleanup process. Other things, the last two really deal with that educational process, right? It's visits to the site to have a look at the site in a safe perspective, to really get your not hands-on, but an eyes-on look at the site. For me, looking at site makes so much a difference in the world as opposed to looking at things on paper, just looking at data. To actually see what's going on the site is so important. And lastly, I'm going to give you another example here in a minute, but a visit to one of our laboratories. The Dtsc has its own environmental chemistry laboratory, actually two laboratories, one in Pasadena and one in our Berkeley office, to visit those labs to see how those soil samples are analyzed and what those processes are gone through, or to see the water samples or air samples, to see how those technical tests are run. So those last two fall into the education realm. So next slide, please. So here's the example I alluded to a couple minutes ago. We call it ECL, the Environmental Chemistry Laboratory at Dtsc. They have already started a program with high school students in Southern California area, where the high school students have been invited to the lab, if they're interested, to be able to participate and learn about the analytical laboratory process in a safe way. And as you can see from this picture, the students are protected by gloves and coveralls, Tyvek type coverings to protect their clothing and so forth, and masks. This very well may be due to COVID and the laboratory itself. But there's an example where the ECL has brought them into the laboratory. And one of the specific compounds that was the focus of this learning process was to look at some of the chemistry within personal hygiene products. And especially, there's one in particular that's really kind of high on the environmental regulatory science arena's radar, is 1,4-dioxane, as we noticed down there, to see if this 1,4-dioxane is present in those personal care products, and whether the levels of 1,4-dioxane differ between the genders' use of those products. So there's a really good example of educational process. Next slide, please. So here's part of the same process they've gone through, and some of the specifics that those students have gone through as part of the educational process. And actually, learning to use and calibrate that laboratory equipment, how to prepare those samples for analysis, which is a very important step in getting representative soils or water or air results. So we're saying there's a possibility that such programs like this, we could adopt as part of the TAG process to enhance education in the environmental science process. And you know what, bottom line here is we would love to hear from you in terms of any examples or that you might have in terms of any types of these community science type projects would be useful, as it would be tied to one of our response actions. So we really, really strongly encourage you to provide us with something that's on your mind in that regard. So with that, I'm going to hand things back to Joe.
More poll questions. So everyone just stick with us and keep answering. And I think I explained this before. One of the reasons we're using the polling system is that it is an opportunity for everyone who is connected and involved in this meeting to provide input. So everyone, I just hope all of you are continuing to put the answers in. Okay, so for this module, we have just a couple of questions. I think we have 3. And let's go to the first one. Multiple choice, select all that apply. This question is, what kinds of community science activities would benefit your community? There's a list there. You can read through those. There is an option for other at the end, and you will have an opportunity in the next question to give us more details if you choose other. So there's all different kinds of activities that are identified here that could be right for a community science project. So just we can see the answers are coming in. So community science activities that could benefit your community include health and safety monitoring, community science training, Dtsc Cleanup Site visit, Dtsc environmental testing laboratory visit, community data gathering, and then the other category, which we'll get a chance to answer. So it looks like all of these are of interest to our participants and the communities that you're representing here this evening. We'll pause just a moment. It looks like and answers are continuing to trickle in on this one. But it looks like we're hearing from many of you about wanting to take a look at a community science activity that relates to health and safety. We can go to the next question. This is an open-ended question, so you can type your answers in. How else could a community science project benefit your community? So we gave you some examples of what a community science project could address in communities in the last question. But what other ideas do you have for a community science program that could benefit your community? And the answers are coming in. Here's an example, great example of a community science project that was done locally. Thank you so much for the link. An idea is that someone else has popped in was scientists, engineers, tribal affairs, and media specialists mentoring at the local public schools. Engaging high school and college students to recruit them for careers in environmental science, a program that would give people a hands-on experience in habitat restoration, allowing all voices, safe schools, testing runoff, tidal influence, and testing sea creatures. Knowledge is power include drone monitoring of site development, air monitoring by the community, establishing a community garden. These fantastic ideas. We do have one more question about community science, but we're going to hold off, give you all a moment to think about any other answers, any other ideas that you might have for a community science project. Okay, let's go to the next question. All right, so the last question was more focused about like your own community. And now we want you to kind of pull up and take a bird's eye view, thinking about the entire state of California. And we want to know what other ideas for community project science projects that that you have that could be funded with a technical assistance grant program. So what else is out there in the universe of ideas for community science projects that you think could be good for other communities around the state? All right, so air monitoring, a Selby Slide Community Alternative Plan. This is kind of like brainstorming using a poll question. We really just are using this question to hear as many ideas and that you all have about community science projects. Okay, we've got ideas coming in about particulate modeling, air sampling, soil sample surveys, water quality monitoring projects. Cooperating with the schools and local government for ongoing education of community members. 10 million tan oak trees injected with toxins need to be addressed. Air monitoring, engage retired citizen scientists. There's an answer in here about the US EPA conducting a pilot study to engage communities in vapor intrusion investigation through the use of indicators, tracers, and surrogates. Pollinator projects on waiting land. I might pronounce this, but the Dtsc Water Project. I might be mispronouncing Dtsc, so forgive me. Activation of community as citizen scientists along shorelines. Do you want to take a moment before we're going to move on to our last portion of our meeting here this evening in just a moment, but the answers are still coming in. So we're going to hold off a moment, make sure we get all of the answers in. Okay, so other ideas are the greening of barren lands, the sampling of the local environment, and reviewing the results with the community. Better toxicity testing for both the toxic site itself and the bay mud near Selby Slag. Agriculture projects around toxic runoff. I can see how you're thinking through all the different and varied regions of this great state of ours. Watershed studies, agriculture, or that would be a different word, but we'll document that and record that. Let's now go to our fourth and final component of our meeting this evening. And we've heard a lot from all of you already about the importance of community engagement in the Technical Assistance Grant Program. Ed, you've got some information and remarks you want to share with us, and then we'll go to the poll questions.
Very good. Thanks again, Joan. So at this point, I'm going to circle back with the full intention of sounding like the broken record that I talked about at the beginning of this session. And first of all, I can't emphasize enough, we need your input on the TAG program so we can align it with our stakeholders' interests. We need the input of other community stakeholders to make this program work. So I want to emphasize to everybody, please continue to engage with us. Please invite others who may not have been able to take part in this polling session tonight to actually take the same set of polling questions on our Technical Assistance Grants website, our webpage. We're going to provide a link to that here in the end so we can gather even a broader range of responses to these questions. And we'll have that up and going for a month or so to be able to gather as much information as we can. So now we're going to move on to the last set of questions from Joan, but I just want to say again, I cannot thank you enough for working with us tonight and participating in this polling session. Just some wonderful ideas out there and suggestions and just great information. So once again, thank you so much. And I'm going to turn it over to Joan for that final set of questions.
All right, here we go, everyone. We'll go to our first question on community engagement, multiple choice. So based on the information that we presented here in this meeting, would you use a technical assistance grant primarily to provide financial support for, and fill in the blank? And here we're asking that you just select one answer. So are you most interested for your community in the technical advisor, or community science, or both? Maybe you don't know yet, so you would answer D. And then E is you're not thinking about applying for a grant at this time. The results to this question are showing that many of our participants here this evening are thinking about both the community science and the technical advisor components of the TAG program. Good to know. Our next question is going to pop up on the screen in just a moment. Another multiple choice. If you are going to apply for a grant, would you do so as, and you can select as many that apply under this one. We know that many of you wear multiple hats. So would you apply as a nonprofit organization, a community group, as an individual, tribal community, tribal government? Maybe you would apply as being a member of a school or a university, especially for the technical advisor program, or a consulting firm, or maybe as an individual. And those last three are more related to the technical advisor component. You can see how the answers are starting to distribute across our different options here. So many of you are identifying that you would apply as a nonprofit or as a community group, but we also have potential technical advisors here in this meeting, which is awesome. And some of you are from a school or university or a consulting firm, or operate as an individual technical advisor. Let's go to the next question. And we'll just spend a moment or two on this. If you hit other on the last question in terms of who you would be applying for the grant as, we'll give you moments to identify what category we missed on that last slide. So if you're not associated with a community group or a nonprofit or a university and so on, let us know who you are associated with as you're thinking about a grant application. An interested neighbor. A local non-regulatory government that has tax exempt status as a special district. Interesting. We have a couple more questions for you. Let's go to the next one. Okay. Are there any other individuals, groups, or organizations that DTSC should reach out to for further input and development of the Technical Assistance Grant Program? So we know that all of you are familiar with a lot of organizations, different types of government agencies, special districts, alliances. Who do you want to make sure DTSC communicates with and talks to as part of their development of the TAG program? So someone's typed in the California Resource Conservation Districts. That's a great example. Shoreline community organizations such as the Richland Shoreline Alliance. Tribal organizations. If you have specific names, that's helpful because then DTSC will just make sure to put them on their list. Schools such as the Stanford Law Clinic and the Golden Gate University. Awesome. Resource conservation districts of the Santa Monica Mountains, with the name of the CEO there, thank you. Don't exclude local people for special interests. The Monterey Air District, another kind of government agency that we haven't talked much about, but are the air districts. We'll take another moment here while you're thinking of other answers. Tech team, let's go to the next question. This is another multiple choice question. What is the best way for DTSC to engage stakeholders about the Technical Assistance Grant Program? Select all that apply. So think about yourself, your colleagues, your neighbors, your family. What is the best way for DTSC to engage and communicate with stakeholders around the Technical Assistance Grant Program? There's different options here. Virtual information sessions, in-person sessions, more polling sessions like this, workshops and round tables, online information. Again, select all that apply. Conversations with DTSC staff right now has a lot of hits on it. Team, let's go to the next question. Okay, this is a very open-ended question. So please share your comments, your questions, and your suggestions about the Technical Assistance Grant Program. So this is a question like, when you're at an in-person meeting and there's the comment card, and you can use that comment card to submit whatever's on your mind and you want to share with the project team. This is that question. So just, whatever's on your mind that you want to make sure DTSC hears in relationship to the Technical Assistance Grant Program, use this question to convey that to the team. We have answers coming in. Make information easier and speak with the impacted communities. DTSC should speak to all interested members of the community. Thank you for including us in this process. Communities that want or need technical assistance are likely to have disagreements with DTSC. It's important that the technical advisors remain as independent advisors. People should not be silenced for being critical of a program that fails to implement. DTSC needs to listen to nonprofits. Good luck. There are quite a few special interests that want to be involved. 30 years of involvement and you're still trying to figure it out. Do not continue denigrating the citizen science as not legally defensible. Invite community groups to roundtable meetings regularly. Looks like we might have heard all the answers, but I'm just going to pause to see if any more come in. All right, we've got someone saying they're impressed by the efforts to involve the public. You might have a gateway website that is only for the tag effort. Create a database with shared facts. Yes, great idea to involve the community. Special interests are top Fortune 500 companies. Don't target community members at meetings that they were invited to. Sometimes the answers come in bursts like that. So I'm just going to hold off another moment or two before we move on in case more come in. All right, I think we should, the tech team's communicating with me something about this. I'm just going to pause for a sec so I can answer their question. So we're going to go to the wrap-up slide. And we just want to give you some information about what's next. Again, we've taken all of the poll questions and made an online survey. And that link to the survey was just entered into the chat box. So you can grab that and then you could share it with people. We would really love it if you help to get that link out to other community members so that they can also provide input. Just as you've heard from Ed and Isabella, DTSC is going to take this feedback and use it to inform the development of the TAG program. There are future public engagement sessions that are being planned, so please go to the website and make sure if you aren't signed up for email updates, make sure you do that. And think about this information that's been provided. think about your application and just continue to give your suggestions to DTSC about the tag program. So there's an email address there for that you can use for the email. And again, the website address was just dropped into the chat box. So let's go to the next slide. I think that might have been it. No, okay. This is what I was really looking for. So here's the link to the webpage for tag. And tech team, if you can drop that link into the chat box so people can grab that link for the webpage too, that'd be great. Again, this session has been recorded and we are going to post it online. And I know we've said it about 10 times during this meeting, but that survey is going to be posted on the webpage too. And so, so please help us get that survey link distributed and so we can keep this good conversation going. Thank you so much for your participation in this polling session. And I know how much the team appreciates it as in DTSC at large. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your evening and have something good planned for yourself, whether it's a nice relaxing dinner, maybe a good book, or hanging out with some friends or family. All right, everyone, have a good evening. Thank you.